So now we're going to talk about the major scale. Now, kind of like we did before in the basic building blocks, we're going to start on middle C, and we're just going to walk up the white keys of the piano, starting middle C. So if you did that, congratulations, you just played your first C major scale. Now, what makes a major scale major? Basically, in simple terms, it's the pattern of whole steps and half steps. Now, just to review, a whole step, let's go back to middle C. When you walk up to D, notice how there's a black key in the middle here? That's what makes C to D a whole step, because there is a half step in the middle here. See what I'm saying? So the same way, D to E, there's a half step in the middle here. So D to E is a whole step. Now look here, between E and F, there is no black key in the middle, right? So this is a half step. So look at what the pattern is for major scale. You start on 1, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's the pattern of every major scale. Now, I'd suggest get in the book and review that, but for right now, all you got to remember is there's a pattern of whole steps and half steps that makes a major scale major. And you can start on any of the 12 notes. You can start anywhere, and you can use that pattern to play a major scale. Use that pattern of whole steps and half steps. Now, what you're going to find, if you start on the key of C, you notice that you didn't have to use any black keys at all, right? That makes C real convenient when I'm teaching theory. I love to use the key of C. If you start anywhere else, say if you start on G, for instance, or if you start on F, for instance, you're going to have to use at least one of those black keys in order to make that major scale pattern work out. And that's why we need key signatures. Now, think about this. There are other scales that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I would say easily 90% of the modern pop rock music that we play, 90% of the modern worship music we do is based on the major scale. So that's a big chunk of everything you need to know. We will talk later about other scales like the minor scale, you do see occasionally. The pentatonic scale is another one that you run into sometime. The blues scale is kind of its own cool variation you need to know about. Chromatic scales, whole tone scales. There are some other options. We're going to talk about the modes a little bit. But for right now, let's really focus on the major scale. Think about this too. We talked about the scale degrees. Another word I want to put in your brain is interval. So we're just walking up stepwise. We're thinking scale degrees. Now when you jump from here to here, from 1 to 3, that interval is like a distance, right? That interval is called a third. If you walk from 1 to 4, that interval is called a fourth. And you definitely want to look at the chart in the book because it has all that stuff laid out. 1 to 5 is a fifth, etc., etc. So you're going to get really familiar with the scale degrees and those intervals, and there's some great stuff to look at in the book, charts and graphs that you can study. One other thing, and this is really important, sometimes people get confused. I always like to say, music is not Monopoly. Think about this for a minute. When you're at go on Monopoly, right, and you roll the dice and you get a 3, you start on go and you count 1, 2, 3. Well, music is different. When we start a scale on C, that's not 0. C is actually 1. You follow what I'm saying? So if you're going to walk up a third, you don't count that as 0 and start counting 1, 2, 3. No, no, no. When it comes to music, where you are is 1. So you start counting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Make sense? So your starting point of your interval is 1, not 0. Got it?